I taught PE for 34 years, which means I have watched roughly 40,000 children cry. You get good at it. That's not a boast, it's just repetition. By about year 6, you can tell from the far side of a netball court whether it's a real ankle or a maths test they're avoiding. Real pain doesn't perform. It goes quiet and it goes inward, and the child gets very interested in the ground. The fake ones look at you. That's the tell. They always check whether you're watching. 34 years. Nuneaton, mostly. I could spot a faker at 40 paces, and I was almost never wrong. On the 14th of January, 2025, a woman I loved stood in the departures hall at Suvarnabhumi and cried so hard she couldn't get a sentence out, and she did not look at me once. Not once. She looked at the floor, and at her hands, and at a point somewhere over my left shoulder, and I stood there thinking, with the full weight of 3 decades of professional judgment behind it, that's real. That's absolutely real. And it was. That's the bit nobody wants. Everyone who hears this story wants the tears to be fake. They want the airport scene to be the punchline. She cried, she waved, she went straight to the bank. What an actress. And I've let people think that, because it's shorter and it makes me less pathetic, and because the truth requires about 4,000 words of setup. She wasn't acting. She was crying because she knew exactly what she was going to do that afternoon, and she could not stop herself doing it. And standing in that terminal, she was saying goodbye to me twice. Once for the 6 weeks I'd be away, and once properly, because she knew what would be left when I got back. I've had 14 months to arrive at that, and I'd rather have the version where she's a monster. It's warmer. Right. Let's do this properly. I married Allison in 1990. We met at a teacher training thing in Loughborough, and we were married for 29 years. And I'm not going to slag her off, because she was not a bad woman, and because my daughter might watch this. What I will say is this. Somewhere around 2003, and I've thought about the date, I think it was 2003. It might have been 2004. It was the year we did the extension. The warmth went out of it. Not the function. We functioned brilliantly. 2 teachers, 2 incomes, a mortgage, a daughter, a caravan in Abersoch, and a household that ran like a well-managed department. What went was the other thing. The being glad to see you thing. I want to be fair. I don't think she did that to me. I think 2 people can simply become colleagues, and neither of them notices the exact week it happens. But I'll tell you what 16 years of that does to a man, because it's the entire mechanism of this story. It doesn't make you sad, it makes you thirsty. You develop a specific hunger that you don't have a name for, and you keep it quiet, because naming it out loud at 52 would be humiliating, and it sits there getting worse. And then one day, somebody is genuinely pleased to see you, and your whole nervous system goes off like a fire alarm. We divorced in 2019. It was extremely civilized. Sold the house in Weddington, split it, she kept the caravan, and I didn't want it. My share came to about £131,000, and I had another 44 in a tax-free lump from taking the teacher's pension early. 175,000, and an income of just under 19 grand a year from the pension, index-linked, which is not a fortune, and which is, and I want to stress this, a completely fine retirement for a man with no mortgage and modest habits. I went at 57 in July 2022. I could have gone on to 60, but the department had changed and I'd stopped enjoying it, and, if I'm honest, I'd become one of those blokes in the staff room that the young ones are polite to. Then I had 8 months of absolutely nothing. I got a dog. That helped for about 6 weeks. I did park run. I went to the gym at the leisure center, where I used to take year 9, and got treated like a member of the public by a lad I'd taught in 2011. I saw my daughter Chrissy roughly fortnightly, and I could hear myself talking too much on the phone. I had lunch with Dev, who I'd taught alongside for 19 years, and he asked how I was, and I said, yeah, good, so quickly that we both heard it. Bangkok was Dev's brother-in-law's thing, funnily enough, a fitness holiday. 2 weeks in February 2023, at a place near On Nut. Muay Thai in the mornings for those that wanted it, strength work, a lot of very expensive smoothies. I went because it had a structure, and because I was 58 and had not been anywhere in 4 years. I want to say something about Bangkok that isn't in these stories usually. I loved it, and not for the reasons people assume. I loved it because it's a working city. 6 in the morning on Soi Sukhumvit 77, there are 40 people cooking, hosing, welding, unloading, shouting, and every single one of them is doing something. After 8 months of a retired man's Tuesday, being surrounded by that much purpose was like getting oxygen. I'd walk to the gym at 5:30 and feel my chest open up. I met Nadine on day 3. She was not Thai. I mention that early because it seems to surprise people, and because it's the first thing that makes this story slightly different from the ones you've heard. Nadine was Canadian, 44, from Kelowna in British Columbia. She'd been in Asia 11 years, Seoul first, then Hong Kong, then Bangkok since 2018, and she taught reformer Pilates and strength at the same gym, which is where I met her, because she corrected my deadlift in front of about 9 people in a manner I would describe as brisk. 44 and 61 is not a scandal. That's the other thing. Nobody in this story is 23. There was no bar, no agency, no family in a village, no dowry, none of the furniture people expect. She was a middle-aged professional woman from a nice town in Canada with a master's degree in kinesiology and a laugh you could hear from the car park. And she was pleased to see me. That's it. That's the whole thing. On day 4, she said, "Oh good, you came back," when I walked in. And something in my chest did a maneuver it had not done since about 1998. And if you have never had 16 years of pleasant coldness followed by one woman being visibly glad you walked through a door, then I genuinely cannot explain to you what that is worth. I would have signed anything. I did sign things, as it turns out. But that came later. 2 weeks became 3. I extended the flight, which cost me 280 quid, and felt like the most rebellious act of my adult life. I went home in March 2023, and we spoke every day for 11 months. I went back in July for 3 weeks, and October for 2, and the following January for a month. And in March 2024, aged 59, I gave notice on the flat in Nuneaton, put the dog with Chrissy, and moved to Bangkok on a non-immigrant O visa, converted from a tourist entry, with the intention of switching to a retirement extension when I hit 50 and, well, I was already past 50. It was straightforward. An agent did it. 18,000 baht and a morning at Changwathana. I need to state the financial requirement clearly, because it's load-bearing for everything that follows. For a retirement extension in Thailand, you must show either 800,000 baht sitting in a Thai bank account in your own name, seasoned for the required period, or a monthly income of 65,000 baht, or a combination. My pension converted to about 58,000 baht a month, which was close, but not enough on its own. So I went the deposit route. 800,000 baht, about 18,000 pounds at the rate that spring. So I had to have a Thai bank account with a substantial balance in it. That was not optional. That was the price of being allowed to live in the country. And that account, that specific, mandatory, immigration-driven account, is the loose thread that the whole of the rest of my life came apart on. Here's what I did, and I'd like you to notice that every step of it is sensible. I opened a Thai baht account in my own name in April 2024 at a branch in On Nut, which took 2 visits and a certificate of residence from immigration. Into that went 800,000 baht plus a buffer, because you do not want to be 1 baht short when you renew. Call it 900,000. Then, over the following 2 months, I moved the bulk of my liquid savings across. This was not stupidity. Sterling to baht was moving in my favor. I had no UK property. I was paying UK side fees on every card transaction, and I was going to be living there permanently. My financial advisor in Coventry, a perfectly competent bloke, actually agreed with the principle, though he did say, and I quote from the email because I have read it more times than is healthy, "Keep a reserve here." I kept a reserve there, 71,000 pounds, in an ISA and a cash account, untouched. I moved 96,000, 4.2 million baht, roughly, across 3 transfers in April, May, and June 2024. And in June, we made it a joint account. Now, I've heard what people say about this, and I want to head it off, because the assumption is that she asked. She did not ask. It was mine. It was entirely provably mine. And I can prove it because I raised it at a restaurant on Soi Thong Glor. And she said, and I remember it exactly, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" That's what she said. I have taken that sentence apart so many times I've worn the letters off it. At the time, I heard it as a woman being careful with a man she loved. Now, I think there is a reasonable chance it was the last honest warning I was ever going to get, delivered by someone who was hoping I'd say no. I said yes. I said something along the lines of, "We're doing this properly, or we're not doing it." The bank made it an either signatory account, which is the standard arrangement. Either of us could operate it alone. No second signature required. I registered her mobile for the one-time passcodes because she was the one in the country who'd be using it. And I got a card, and she got a card, and the online banking was set up on her phone because mine was on a UK number, and the app was a nightmare with international SMS. Sensible. Every bit of it. Ask anyone. Let me tell you about the 15 months, because they were the happiest of my life, and I refused to retroactively poison them. We lived in a 2-bedroom on Sukhumvit 71, with a balcony you could get 2 chairs on. $32,000 a month. I did Muay Thai 3 mornings a week at 59 years old and got quite reasonable at it in a way that would have astonished my year 11s. I did a Thai course at a place near Ekamai and got to the point where I could conduct an entire transaction about fruit. Nadine taught 11 classes a week and earned, I'd guess, 60 or 70,000 baht a month, which she never discussed in detail and which I never asked about, because she was a grown woman with her own income and asking felt like something Allison would have done. Note that. I'll come back to it. Her daughter Maya was 19 and at university in Vancouver, and they FaceTimed on Sundays, and I met her twice on screen, and she called me Graham and was lovely. Nadine's mother was alive in Kelowna. Nadine had been divorced in 2013 from a Korean-Canadian bloke she didn't talk about much except to say it had been a financial thing, which I filed under painful and left alone. Painful and left alone. I did quite a lot of that. Here's the list. I've made a list, because that's what you do at 3:30 in the morning for about a year. She was on her phone a great deal in the evenings, and it was not social media, because I'd glance over and it was columns of numbers on a dark background and she'd say it was her class scheduling app. Class scheduling. On a Saturday at 11 at night. For a Sunday, she didn't teach. She got extremely, weirdly animated during live sport. Not football. Anything. Tennis, cricket, a K-League match, an NBA game at 9 in the morning Bangkok time that she'd have on with the sound off while doing something else. And I thought, well, she's an athlete. She's a sports person. Of course she likes sport. I liked that about her. Twice. I think twice. It might have been 3 times. She had a night where she was flat and quiet and slightly gray and said she was getting a migraine, and the next day she was electric. Up, funny, ravenous, wanting to go out. Money moved oddly, and I explained every single instance. In September 2024, she paid for a weekend in Krabi entirely. Insisted on it, hotel and flights, which cost the best part of 30,000 baht, and which I let her do because refusing felt patronizing. 6 weeks later, she was short for her half of the rent, and I covered it, and she was mortified. In November, she asked me, very carefully, over about 10 minutes, with a proper preamble, whether I'd consider lending her 400,000 baht for a studio deposit. She wanted to open her own place. It was a real plan. She had a location in mind on Sukhumvit 49, and she'd worked out the equipment costs. I said yes in about 11 seconds. £9,000, straight out of the joint account, which she could have taken anyway without asking, and I want you to hold on to that, because the fact that she asked for money she already had access to is the single most important thing in this entire story, and I did not understand it for over a year. She was asking permission. She was, I now think, trying to make it a real thing with a real conversation so that it wouldn't be the other thing. The studio never opened. There was a delay with the unit. Then the landlord was difficult. Then it was after Songkran. Then it was quietly not mentioned again. And I did not chase it, because chasing it would have meant treating her like a debtor. Malie on the gym reception said something to me in December, and I've thought about it a lot. Nadine had canceled 2 classes that week, and Malie said, in passing, in the friendliest possible way, She okay? She cancel a lot now, not like before. And I said she'd been under the weather. And Malie gave me a look that I chose, at the time, to interpret as concern for a colleague. Neil said something too. Neil was an Englishman from Doncaster who did the Muay Thai on the same mornings. Been in Bangkok 9 years, sold industrial pumps. He asked me one morning, entirely casually, over a coffee, "Mate, is your visa money in a joint account?" I said yes. And he said, mine's separate, just for the paperwork. Just for the paperwork. He gave me the whole thing, right there, in 6 words, and he was too polite to say it twice, and I heard nothing at all. Because here is what I was doing, and it took a therapist 8 months to get me to say it out loud. I was not failing to notice. I was actively not looking. There is a difference, and it matters. I had 34 years of professional pattern recognition, and a brain that had spent 3 decades assessing whether a 15-year-old was really injured. And that machinery was fully operational the entire time. It saw the phone at 11 at night. It saw the flat evenings and the electric mornings. It saw a woman ask permission for money she already had, and every single time it produced an observation. Another part of me, the part that had done 16 years of a marriage where nobody was glad to see anybody, put its hand over the machinery's mouth. Because if I looked, I might find something, and if I found something, this would end, and I would go back to being a 59-year-old man in a flat in Nuneaton whose dog liked him. I wasn't deceived. I was complicit in my own not knowing, and I'd been rehearsing that skill for 2 decades before I ever met her. Chrissy had her first baby on the 8th of January 2025. A girl, Erin. I booked the flight the same night. 6 weeks, the 14th of January to the 25th of February, because there was no point going for a fortnight. And because I hadn't seen my daughter in 11 months, and because I was going to be a grandfather, and I was, I don't mind saying, absolutely in bits about it. Nadine couldn't come. Her visa situation was a non-B tied to the gym, and leaving and re-entering during a renewal window was a genuine problem, and it was genuinely a problem. I checked it myself. So we did the sensible thing, which was to make sure the bills were covered while I was away. Rent, electric, water, internet, her phone, the maid, my Thai health insurance premium, which was due in February. She'd handle all of it from the joint account. She had full access already. Nothing changed on the 14th of January. Not one permission, not one password. Nothing. The only thing that changed was that I was 7,000 miles away, and I had stopped being a person who might walk into a room. The airport. Right. We got there at 8:30 in the morning for a lunchtime flight, because I am the sort of man who does that. We had breakfast at the place on the 4th floor. She had the fruit thing. I had eggs and didn't finish them because I never can before a flight. And at the barrier she went. I have never seen an adult cry like that. Not a wobble, not the eyes going. Her whole body. She had both hands over her face, and her shoulders were going. And she was making a noise I'd only ever heard from bereaved people. And it went on for long enough that a member of ground staff came over and asked, in Thai, if everything was all right. And I said yes, because I thought it was. I said all the things. 6 weeks! It's nothing. I'll ring you when I land. I'll be back before Songkran. And she said, and this is the sentence, this is the one that has cost me the most sleep. She said, I'm sorry. Not I'll miss you. Not don't go. I'm sorry. I thought she was apologizing for crying. I actually said, don't be daft. It's fine. I said don't be daft. She took her hands off her face for about a second and a half and looked at me, and there it was. The check. The thing I'd been trained by 40,000 children to spot. The look to see if you're watching. Except it wasn't that at all. It was the exact opposite. It was a woman checking whether I'd understood, and hoping to God I had, and finding that I hadn't. Then she put her hands back over her face, and I went through the barrier, and that was the last time I saw her. England was wonderful, and I'm not going to let this story take that off me either. Erin was 8 days old when I met her. I stayed at Chrissy's in Bedworth in a box room with a Peppa Pig duvet. I did the 4 a.m. shifts so my daughter could sleep. I saw Dev twice. I walked the dog, who remembered me, which I was pathetically grateful for. I used my Thai card twice in 5 weeks. once for a transfer to cover the insurance premium, and once at a cash point in Coventry to get a bit of walking around money. On the 16th of January, 2 days after I landed, it worked. Everything worked. Then I didn't use it again for 26 days, because I was in England using an English card and living in my daughter's house. The 11th of February 2025, about 3:30 in the afternoon, Sainsbury's on Newtown Road in Bedworth. I'd gone in for a birthday card for Allison, which sounds odd and isn't. We'd got to the point where we were fine and I sent her a card each year. And I wanted to move some money across for a thing Chrissy needed for the baby, and I thought I'd check what was in the Thai account. And I put the card in the machine outside because it was easier than the app. Balance inquiry, Thai account. It came up in Thai baht, which the machine handled fine. 11,460 baht, 262 pounds. I want to describe what happened in my body, because it's not what I would have predicted from 34 years of watching other people receive bad news. Nothing happened, nothing at all. I did not feel sick. My legs were fine. My hands were completely steady. What I felt, and I have never been able to explain this to anyone's satisfaction, was a sort of mild professional interest, as though I'd found an error in a spreadsheet. I remember thinking, quite clearly, that's wrong. The decimal's out. I pressed for another balance inquiry. Same number. I pressed a third time, and the machine gave me a receipt I didn't ask for, and I put it in my coat pocket, and I went inside, and I bought the birthday card. I bought the card, I queued, I paid. There was a woman in front of me buying cat litter, and I remember thinking she'd chosen the wrong sort. I got to the car park and sat in the car, and did not start it for 50 minutes. 4.1 million baht was gone. 91,400 pounds, near enough, at the rates across that period. And here's the thing about the title of this. The afternoon, the airport, the empty account. It wasn't one afternoon. That's the tidy version, and the tidy version is a lie. She had started in September 2024, 4 months before I flew. I got the full statement in March, after a very long morning at a branch in Bangkok with my passport and a lot of patience. And it ran to 14 pages, and I read it on a plastic chair by a water cooler. September. 3 withdrawals, 45,000, 60,000, 30,000 baht. October 7, ranging from 20 to 140,000. November, the 400,000 for the studio, plus 5 others. December, 11 separate transactions. And then from the 14th of January, the day I flew, it goes vertical. 14th of January, 200,000. 15th, 350. 16th, 400. The 17th, 600,000 baht in 3 transactions in one day. By the 22nd of January, there was 160,000 baht left. By the 2nd of February, 40. By the 8th, 11,460, which is where it stopped, because there was nothing left to take. She had emptied it 3 days before I walked into that Sainsbury's, and for those 3 days she had been ringing me every evening at 9 my time and asking about the baby. That's the part that finished me, not the money, the 9 o'clock calls. I rang her from the car park at about 4:30. She answered on the second ring, which I have since decided means she'd been waiting 26 days for that call. I said, "The account's empty," and she said, "I know. Not what? Not there must be a mistake. I know." 2 syllables. Instantly. No gap at all. I asked her where it had gone, and she told me. All of it, in one go, for about 40 minutes, sitting somewhere quiet with the balcony door shut, in a voice I'd never heard her use. Online sports betting, since 2016. 9 years. That's what a financial thing had meant about the marriage in 2013. That had been the first round, before betting, when it was something else. Nadine had a compulsion that predated me by the better part of a decade, that had cost her a marriage and a career step in Hong Kong, that she had beaten twice for periods of over a year, and that had come back in about the middle of 2024, in the way those things do, which is quietly and then all at once. The columns of numbers on the dark screen at 11 at night, the K-League match at 9 in the morning, the flat gray evenings and the electric next days. That's not a migraine, that's a loss, and then a chase. The 30,000 baht weekend in Krabi 6 weeks before she couldn't cover her half of the rent. Every single item on my 3 a.m. list, explained, in order, in about 4 minutes. The 400,000 for the studio was real. Incidentally, she'd meant it. She had genuinely intended to open that place, and she had genuinely believed, in November, that having a project would fix her. It was gone inside 11 days. And the reason she'd asked me for it, the reason she asked permission for money she could have taken with a card, is the thing I'd been staring at for a year without seeing. She was trying to make it a transaction between two people, rather than a thing she did alone in a room. She was, in the only way she had left, asking to be caught. I asked her about the airport. She said she had known since about the first week of January what she was going to do. Not planned it. Known it. She said the 6 weeks was the longest I had ever been away, and that she had understood, watching me book the flight, exactly what was going to happen, and exactly how little she was going to be able to do about it. She said she nearly told me at the breakfast place on the 4th floor. She said she got as far as putting her fork down. I asked her why she didn't, and she said, "Because you were so happy about the baby. Take that however you want. I've had 14 months and I take it differently on different days. Some days it's the most human sentence anybody's ever said to me. Some days it's a woman who found a reason not to ruin her own evening. Mostly I think it's both, and that people are not tidy, and that I would very much like them to be. I stayed in England the full 6 weeks. That surprises people too. I didn't fly back early because there was nothing to fly back to, and because my daughter had a 5-week-old baby and I was doing the 4 a.m. shifts, and because, and this is the honest reason, I could not face telling anybody, and the moment I got on that plane I'd have to. So I did the last 3 weeks of being a grandfather with 102,000 pounds gone, and I said nothing to anyone. I changed nappies. I did a Tesco run every other day. I watched a lot of daytime television with a baby on my chest. Chrissy said at one point that I seemed quiet, and I said I was just tired, which was the only completely true thing I said in England. She knows now. I told her in April, on the phone, badly, and she was furious with Nadine for about 10 minutes, and then she cried, and then she said the thing that actually broke me, which was, "Dad, you should have told me while you were here." I told Dev in May. He was very good about it. He didn't say anything clever. I never told Neil. He worked it out. You can't move to a smaller flat in that part of Bangkok without people working it out. And one morning at the gym, about 2 months after, he just put a coffee down in front of me and didn't ask a single question. And we did the pads, and that was that. Best thing anybody did for me in the whole business. Going back into the flat on the 25th of February was the worst hour of it. Worse than the cash point by a considerable distance. She'd moved out on the 19th. She'd left a key with the building manager, and she'd left the place immaculate, which I think was meant kindly, and which had the effect of a crime scene that had been wiped down. Her side of the wardrobe was empty. The reformer she kept in the spare room was gone. There was a bag of my Post on the counter, sorted. She'd defrosted the freezer. She'd left the 2 balcony chairs where they were, and taken the little table between them, which I have never understood, and which for some reason is the detail I think about most. And on the counter, next to the Post, was an envelope with 9,400 baht in it in cash, and a note that said, "This is what I had left. I'm sorry. 200 quid, against 91,000. I sat on the balcony on one of the 2 chairs with no table between them, and I laughed for a bit, which alarmed me more than anything else that happened that year. I spent the 9,400, incidentally, over about 3 weeks. On food, mostly. I wasn't going to make a gesture out of it. I was 61 and I needed to eat. And refusing 200 pounds on principle when you've just lost 91,000 is exactly the sort of thing that makes you feel like a man in a film rather than a man in a flat. The other thing I have to be honest about is the 6 weeks of phone calls, because that's the bit people ask about most, and I've been evasive. She rang me every evening at 9 my time, which is 4 in the morning hers. Every evening, for 38 days. And they were good calls. She asked about Aaron's weight, and whether Chrissy was sleeping, and whether the health visitor had been. She remembered names. She remembered that Chrissy's partner is called Ross, and that his mother is a nightmare. On the 29th of January, she talked me down off a genuinely bad hour when I'd had a row with Allison about something to do with the christening. She was, in those 38 calls, the best friend I have ever had. And in the same 24-hour periods, she was moving 2 and 3 and 600,000 baht out of an account we shared. I have tried very hard to work out which one of those was the lie, and I have concluded, reluctantly, that neither of them was. That's the thing about a compulsion, and I didn't know this before, and now I know rather too much about it. It doesn't replace the person. It runs alongside them. It doesn't switch off the part that loves you, or the part that remembers your daughter's partner's name. It just takes the car keys at 4 in the morning and drives. And the rest of her sat in the passenger seat ringing me at 9 to ask about the baby. Right. The practical part, because there's a lot of nonsense talked about this, and I've now had the education. I went to the police. Of course I did. I flew back on the 25th of February as planned, because the ticket was booked and because I still, on some level, thought there'd be something to sort out. And I went to the station on the following Tuesday with a Thai lawyer at 4,000 baht for the consultation. It took him under half an hour to explain the position, and he was very decent about it. The account was a joint account with either signatory authority. Both of us were legal owners of the funds in it. Both of us were entitled to withdraw. All of it, any of it, without the other's consent, without notice, without explanation. When she took that money, she was not breaking into anything. She was exercising a right that I had gone to a bank branch in On Nut in June 2024, and specifically, deliberately, over her stated hesitation, given her. There was no forgery, no stolen card, no unauthorized access. Every transaction was made by a legal account holder using her own credentials on an account bearing her own name. He said I could pursue a civil claim, that there were arguments about the purpose for which the funds were held, about unjust enrichment, about a constructive trust, and that it would take 2 to 4 years and cost a substantial sum, and that at the end of it, if I won, I would hold a judgment against a woman with no assets, whose money had gone into offshore betting accounts, and was, in the most literal sense available, nowhere. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, but not by much. Mr. Graham, you did not have your money stolen. You gave a second person the legal power to spend it, and she spent it. There is no crime in that. There is only a very bad outcome. Then the visa. This is the bit that catches people, and nobody warns you. The 800,000 baht for the retirement extension has to be in a Thai bank account in your own name. Not joint. Mine had been joint since June 2024, which meant that strictly speaking it had not qualified for months, and nobody had picked it up. And now it didn't qualify because there was 11,000 baht in it. My extension was due in June. I did not have 800,000 baht, and my pension of 58,000 a month did not meet the 65,000 income route on its own. So on top of everything else, I had 4 months to either find 18,000 pounds or leave the country I lived in. I found it. That's what the 71,000 in the ISA in England was for. And thank God for a financial advisor in Coventry who said, "Keep a reserve here," in an email in April 2024. If he hadn't, I'd have been on a plane with 2 suitcases. Total then, because we should do the numbers, 91,400 out of the Thai account. 9,000 of that was the studio loan, so it's all the same pot. Add the 400,000 baht. No, that's inside it. Ignore that. Add about 11,000 pounds of other things across the 15 months. The flights I paid for, the deposit on the flat, a laptop, her mother's operation contribution in Kelowna, which I gave freely and would give again. 102,000 pounds of 175. I have 73,000 left and a pension of 19 grand a year, index-linked, and a state pension coming at 67. I am not destitute. Let's be honest about that, because there are men in this situation who genuinely are, and I'm not going to stand next to them and claim the same injury. What I am is 61, with the retirement I planned for cut roughly in half, living in a smaller flat in a worse part of Bangkok, working 2 mornings a week as a strength coach for a gym that pays me under the table in a way I'd rather not discuss with immigration. Nadine went into a program in April 2025. Her mother paid for it. She was in for 11 weeks in Chiang Mai, and as far as I know, she's been clean of it since. and she's back in Kelowna, living with her mother at 45, and Maya doesn't speak to her. She's written to me 4 times. I've read all 4 and answered none. I'm not going to pretend that's strength. It's not forgiveness, and it's not righteous anger. It's that I don't know what to say to somebody who did the worst thing that's ever happened to me while being, as far as I can tell, genuinely sorry the entire time. Now, here's what I've got, and then I'll shut up. Everyone wants me to say the lesson is don't trust her. That's rubbish, and I won't say it. I lived with a woman for 16 years who never took a penny off me, and I'd have swapped every one of those years for 18 months of somebody being glad I came through a door. Trust wasn't the mistake. Trust is the only thing worth having, and the alternative is what I already had in Weddington, and it nearly killed me slower. The mistake was structural, and it's this. Do not put the money you cannot lose in the same place as the money you share. That's it. That's the whole thing. It costs nothing. It takes an afternoon, and it would have saved me £91,000. You want a household account? Fine. Brilliant. Do it. Joint, either signature. Both cards, both apps. No questions asked, and you keep about 2 months of bills in it. 80,000 baht. Top it up monthly by standing order from an account only you can touch. If it all goes wrong, you lose 2 months of bills, which is a bad week and not a life. And the capital, the visa money, the savings, the thing you can't rebuild at 61, sits in a single name account you alone can operate, in a bank that texts your phone with statements to your email, and you look at it on the 1st of every month for 90 seconds. The immigration deposit has to be single name anyway. The rules made me do the right thing, and I overrode them out of romance. Second thing, and this is for the specific man I'm actually talking to. If you have come out of a long, cold marriage, you are not in a normal state, and you should not make irreversible financial decisions in your first 2 years. I don't mean you're stupid. I mean that 16 years of nobody being pleased to see you creates a hunger that will pay literally any price for the thing that ends it, and you will experience paying that price as generosity, and it isn't. It's purchasing. Wait 2 years. If it's real, it'll still be there in 2 years. If it isn't, 2 years is what saves you. Third, and this is the one I'd actually tattoo on somebody. If a person who already has access to your money asks you for some of it, stop and pay attention. That is not politeness. Access plus asking is a signal, and it usually means somebody is trying to make a private thing into a shared thing before it gets away from them. That was my one clean chance. November 2024. She sat me down and did a 10-minute preamble to request 400,000 baht she could have taken with a card while I was in the shower. And I said yes in 11 seconds, because saying anything else felt like an accusation. 11 seconds. I've had 14 months to think about what I'd give for those 11 seconds back. So, the tears. 34 years of children, 40,000 of them. And I got it right. That's the joke. That's the thing that keeps me up. My judgment was perfect. Those tears were completely real, and I called it correctly in about a second and a half at a barrier in Suvarnabhumi. I just assumed real meant safe. That's the last thing I've got, and it's the only bit of wisdom I've come out of this with, and you can have it for free because it cost me £102,000. People can love you and take everything you have in the same fortnight. Both of those are true at once, and neither one cancels the other. And if you've built your entire understanding of human beings on the idea that they can't, then you're not a good judge of character. You're just a man who's been lucky